Not suitable in appearance, they muttered loudly enough for everyone around to hear. Two flight attendants had just refused to allow a black woman, dressed in what they considered cheap clothes, to board first class. They didn't know that she wasn't just a passenger, but the CEO of the airline. When Monica M.O. Carter finally told them who she really was, the smugness drained from their faces like air from a popped balloon, and suddenly their jobs didn't seem so secure anymore. That morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Altitude Air's headquarters in Seattle, bathing the glass conference room in warm light. M.O. stood silently by the huge panoramic window, her silhouette silhouetted against the distant horizon with the Space Needle and the bustling airport below. "The numbers for this quarter are good," she said quietly to CFO Daniel Brooks, adjusting his glasses on his nose. "We're expecting a 15% increase in revenue compared to last year." M.O. nodded thoughtfully, her eyes fixed on the Altitude airplane slowly taxiing onto the runway in the distance. At 49, Monica Carter did not fit most people's image of an airline CEO. She didn't wear designer suits or use trendy words. She preferred jeans and sweatshirts and had earned her position by working her way up from flight attendant to operations manager and finally to the top job just 8 months ago, when the former CEO unexpectedly resigned. Although no one doubted her sharp mind and hard work, Mo never sought fame. "Okay, Daniel," she said, finally turning her attention to the rest of the team sitting around the conference table. "The profit figures are excellent, but I'm concerned about the latest customer satisfaction reports. We do have some issues," admitted Emily Ruiz, head of customer service. "This quarter, complaints about staff behavior are up 9%. M.O. kept her expression calm and unreadable, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Let's not talk about this in general terms," she said. "I need details." "Let's not talk about this in general terms," she said. "I need details." Emily cleared her throat. "Most of the complaints are from first-class and premium passengers," she said cautiously. "Passengers say that our crew is acting arrogant, and there have been reports of racist comments." "Racism?" I repeated, feeling the bitterness in my own voice. "At Altitude Air? The same airline where I, a black woman, started my career 32 years ago, pouring coffee in economy class." It hit me harder than anyone else in the room. I never forgot where I came from. And to be honest, most people who had been with the company long enough to remember didn't either. I still live in the same neighborhood I lived in when I was promoted to supervisor. My car is reliable, but nothing fancy. And unless it's a board meeting or some kind of public event, I usually wear jeans and a sweater. "And maybe," I said, looking around the table, "that's part of the problem." I walked over to my chair at the head of the table and slowly sat down, already running through possible solutions in my head that didn't involve another general training session that didn't address the root cause of the problem. "We've already done retraining on serving black customers," Emily added. "But honestly, what we're dealing with now seems deeper. It's ingrained in the culture." At that moment, my assistant, Jared, handed me a tablet. "You need to see this," he said. I looked down. One of the customer reviews was displayed on the screen. I read it aloud. "The first-class staff treated me like I was nothing. I was judged from the moment I got on the plane. Their attitude, their arrogance, was unbelievable." I put the tablet down. The decision was made. "I have to see this for myself," I said, with my own eyes. Robert leaned forward. "You mean a secret investigation?" I nodded. "Exactly. I'll book a ticket as a regular passenger. No warnings to the crew, no special privileges. I'll be just like everyone else." The room fell silent. There was a feeling of indecision in the air. "With all due respect, M.O., Robert said quietly, "you're the CEO. You could be recognized." I smiled slightly. "Robert, I've been with this company for over 30 years. This morning I walked past 3 new employees in the lobby and they didn't even notice me. They have no idea who I am." I paused, tugging at my jacket sleeve. "And let's be honest, they've never seen me without this. Put me in sneakers and a sweater, and I'm just another black woman over 40 rushing to catch a plane." "That's risky," Emily said quietly. "If I see the problem myself," I replied, "I'll know exactly what needs to be fixed." I turned to Jared. "Book me a ticket on tomorrow's flight from Seattle to Boston. First class. Name, M. Carter. Initials only. I'll pay with my personal card. No VIP privileges. No early boarding. I'll get to the airport by taxi like everyone else. And if anything goes wrong." Jared hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." I looked at each of them in turn. They knew that look meant I had already made up my mind. "We'll figure this out," I said. "But first, I want to know the truth. The whole truth." This airline was founded on the belief that every person deserves respect, regardless of how they dress or how important they seem. If we've strayed from that principle, it's time to get back on track. After the meeting ended, I stayed for a while. I just stood by the window and watched the planes land and take off from Seattle Tacoma Airport. I had no idea that what I was about to do, this little secret experiment, would ultimately teach me more than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom and stared intently at my reflection. I didn't see the stern CEO in an expensive suit with her hair slicked back. Instead, I saw an ordinary woman in a simple gray sweater, worn jeans, and a dark blue baseball cap pulled low over her curls. No makeup, no accessories, just me, unadorned. Perfect, I muttered as I put on the baseball cap for the last time. I didn't look like the professional photo on our website or the woman who sometimes appeared in industry magazines. That was the point. My phone rang. A message from Jared. Ticket confirmed. Flight 372. Departure at 2:15 p.m. I replied, "Are you sure everything's okay?" "Absolutely. No special privileges. Today you're just a regular passenger." The phone rang again. It was confirmation of my taxi booking. I smiled. I finished packing the essentials into a small bag. It wasn't about comfort or even convenience. It was about the truth. It was about seeing with my own eyes how we treat people who don't fit the first-class passenger mold. As soon as I zipped up my bag, the phone rang again. It was Emily. "I've been thinking about your plan," she said right away, without beating around the bush. "What if something goes wrong? How will you react?" I hesitated for a second. "I'm not going to argue with anyone, Emily. I'm going to give our people every opportunity to do their jobs properly. And if they can't, I'll deal with it. That's only fair. It's not about catching anyone," I added. "It's about putting ourselves in our passengers' shoes." After we hung up, I made the final changes. I took off my watch, an expensive gift from a business partner, and replaced my earrings with simple studs. No glitz. No status. Because the truth is in the details. The car arrived right on time. At noon sharp. I got into the back seat, a little surprised at how easy it was when no one recognized me. Just an ordinary woman rushing to catch a plane. "Oh, the United Terminal," I said casually, deliberately mentioning the wrong airline. The driver nodded in the mirror. "That's right." About 20 minutes later, I corrected myself. "Wait, I'm sorry. I meant the Altitude Air Terminal." "No problem," he replied. "Going somewhere nice?" "Boston," I said, getting into character. "Business or pleasure?" I smiled. "Both." As we pulled up to the drop-off spot, I felt a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement. It had been many years since I had flown without a company escort or private entrance. The driver pulled up to the curb. "Have a good flight," he said. "Thanks," I replied, stepping out into the noise and chaos of the main terminal. I was immediately surrounded by the sounds of loudspeakers, the rustling of bags, passengers rushing to their flights, and children in strollers. I walked past the Altitude Air Priority check-in counter and headed straight for the regular line, standing behind a flustered mother struggling with a toddler and a stack of documents. Behind me, a man in a pinstriped suit was yelling into his phone about an upcoming meeting. When I reached the counter, the check-in agent barely looked up. "Destination? Boston. Logan International Airport," I replied. He typed on the keyboard without looking at me. "Boarding pass for M. Carter." "Correct. Gate A17. Departure at 1:45 p.m. No smile. No, "Have a good flight." Nothing. I made a mental note. After passing through security like all the other passengers, no one stopped me, no one recognized me. I entered the terminal. And for the first time in a long time, I saw Altitude Air through the eyes of a passenger. I studied the signs, the uniforms, the crew chatting at the gates. Every little detail caught my attention. What I discovered over the next few hours shook me. Not only as a CEO, but as a person who had dedicated his life to creating something better. I approached Gate A17 just as the announcement was made that passengers requiring special assistance could board. I stepped aside and watched. An elderly man with a walker approached the gate, followed by a mother with 2 children and a bag of diapers. The gate staff quickly and efficiently helped them board, but there was no warmth in their actions. Everything was by the book. No human warmth. Then the announcement changed. "Altitude Air members and first-class passengers, please proceed to boarding." I stood in line with my boarding pass and ID ready. The employee at the gate quickly glanced at my passport, barely looking at me. and let me through with a nod that seemed more like a mandatory formality than a greeting. Right in front of me, a man in an expensive suit received smiles and pleasantries. I thought, slowly climbing the stairs. At the door of the plane stood a flight attendant named Brandon, greeting passengers with a polished smile learned in customer service training. But as soon as the businessman in front of me handed him his pass, Brandon's face lit up. "Welcome aboard, sir. First class is on the left. Would you like something to drink before takeoff?" Then it was my turn. Brandon looked at my sneakers, then at my sweater. His smile disappeared. "Your ticket, please," he said, switching to a business tone. I handed him my ticket. After reading it, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Then he looked at me again, at my skin, at my hands, as if looking for a catch. He ran the card through the scanner more slowly than he had with the previous passengers and frowned slightly, as if something didn't add up. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" he asked, not hiding his doubts. "Yes," I replied calmly, looking him straight in the eye. He looked at the screen, then back at me. "First class is on the left," he finally said, as if he wasn't sure I knew, and added, "Don't forget, there's a dress code on the plane." "Thank you," I replied, nodding cheerfully and trying to sound relaxed. But inside, I was already tense. When I entered the cabin, I saw several passengers already seated in their seats, men in ironed shirts and polished shoes, some already sipping champagne. Another flight attendant, Kyle, was walking from row to row, offering drinks and taking jackets with a smile that seemed genuinely warm. I put my small bag in the overhead compartment and sat down in seat 2C by the window. Finally, Kyle came over to me. He was still holding the tray with drinks, but his smile faded a little when he saw me. "Would you like anything before takeoff?" he asked, not rudely, just detached, emotionless, as if he were talking not to a first-class passenger, but to someone who was out of place. "Sparkling water, please." He poured the water, placed the glass in front of me without saying a word, without even looking me in the eye. "No, please. No, you're welcome." He just poured and left. I watched him leave. The next passenger in the aisle, a white man in an expensive suit, received full service, a broad smile, an offer to hang his jacket, and even a slight chuckle in response to a polite joke. I was left with sparkling water and the feeling that even $1,000 ticket couldn't buy me respect. I leaned back in my seat and watched the boarding process closely. Soon I noticed a pattern. Passengers in more casual attire, especially those who didn't fit the business traveler mold, received minimal service. At the same time, anyone who looked the part was treated like royalty. The cabin was almost full when Brandon caught my attention. He was talking to a young black man in his mid-20s, dressed in jeans and a hoodie. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass again," he said quietly but firmly enough for everyone to turn around. The guy fidgeted nervously and took out his boarding pass. "I was upgraded," he replied, his voice carrying to the front rows. "I have platinum status." Brandon took his ticket and studied it longer than necessary, as if he were trying to find a catch, as if platinum status and dark skin couldn't exist at the same time. Then he finally stepped aside and let him pass without saying a word. No welcome aboard, no obligatory smile he had so generously bestowed on the white passengers earlier. He just stepped aside, and that was it. The guy sat down across from me and looked around, clearly feeling awkward after all that attention. I smiled at him in understanding. He caught my smile, nodded back, and I knew it meant a lot to him. A little later, before takeoff, I decided to stretch my legs and go to the restroom. As I walked by, I bumped into Brandon and Kyle, who were talking quietly at the bar. I slowed down a little. "Another one who doesn't belong here," Kyle muttered, not noticing that I was close enough to hear him. "Did you see his rags, not his clothes?" Brandon grinned. "And the old lady in 2C? Sweatshirt and baseball cap? She's not in first grade." I felt my cheeks flush, but I kept walking. I went into the restroom and closed the door behind me. My heart was pounding, not from embarrassment, but from something deeper. It wasn't about bad service. It was about the mindset, the culture. Back in my seat, I stared out the window, trying to collect my thoughts. After takeoff, service began. Kyle handed out hot towels with silver tongs, like in a five-star restaurant. When he came to me, he didn't even look me in the eye. He just threw the towel on the tray and moved on. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded quickly and moved on to the next passenger, smiling and chatting as if it were brunch at a country club. And so it continued. Well-groomed passengers in expensive suits with neat suitcases got everything: attention, warm smiles, personalized service. They were called by name and asked how their day was going. And me and that young black guy in a hoodie? We were just there, like shadows in the background, as if we had paid for our seats but didn't deserve any attention. And I sat there, taking it all in. Every detail, every gesture, every fleeting glance, every double standard hidden behind politeness. Because this wasn't just a flight. It was a mirror. Our culture had finally stopped hiding and revealed its true face. And I sat there, taking it all in. Every detail, every gesture. When my lunch finally arrived, I couldn't help but notice something. My plate looked dirty. Not even dirty. The main course was slightly askew, the side dish was a little smeared, and the napkin was thrown next to the tray as if it had been an afterthought. My cutlery wasn't even aligned. It looked like someone had thrown it on the table in a hurry. I looked across the aisle. The businessman's tray? Perfect. Everything was arranged exactly as it should be. The napkin was folded, the cutlery was shiny, and the glasses were already filled with sparkling water. "Excuse me," I called to Kyle as he walked by. "Could you bring me some more water?" He didn't stop. He just nodded without turning around. "Sure," he muttered. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Everything was quiet. Meanwhile, I watched him fill glasses all over the lounge, everywhere except our seats. Finally, I pressed the call button. Kyle appeared with an expression of irritation on his face. "Yes. I asked for water a little while ago," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged apologetically. "Yes, I'm sorry." But the tone of his voice said he wasn't sorry at all. As the flight continued, the difference in treatment became more and more noticeable. It wasn't just me and the guy in the hoodie. We were both treated with minimal attention, while the rest of the first-class passengers got all the attention. Warm smiles, refills, joking remarks, amenities. Then came the last straw. We were about 40 minutes from landing when Brandon came over to clear my dessert tray. I hadn't touched the cheesecake. By that point, I had lost my appetite. He glanced at me and asked with a slight smirk, "Would you like to order anything else?" There was enough sarcasm in his voice for me to hear it. I looked at him calmly and meaningfully. "Actually, I'd like to talk to the flight attendant." The smile disappeared from his face. "Is there a problem with the service?" he asked, suddenly speaking more politely. "I just want to talk to the captain," I repeated, this time in a firmer tone. Brandon and Kyle exchanged glances. Kyle nodded and headed for the galley. A moment later, he returned with a tall, elderly flight attendant. He was calm, with gray hair. He wore a badge on his chest that read, "Leonard, Senior Flight Attendant." "Ma'am," Leonard said in an even but cautious voice. "Do you have a complaint?" I looked at the 3 men standing in front of me. I could feel the other passengers staring at us. No one even tried to pretend they weren't listening. I sighed. "Yes," I replied clearly. "I would like to know why passengers in casual attire, especially those of a certain skin color, receive much less attention and respect than those who arrived in business attire." Brandon's eyes widened as if he hadn't expected anyone to say that out loud. Kyle froze, his eyes downcast. Leonard raised his eyebrows but didn't say a word. I don't quite understand what you mean," Leonard said cautiously. "Oh, I think you do," I replied. I took a thin leather wallet out of my purse. Inside was my employee ID card. I opened it and held it out so they could see. Next to my name was the unmistakable Altitude Air logo. Monica Carter, CEO. Brandon turned pale. Kyle jumped back so fast he hit the seat. Leonard stood motionless, but his body began to shake when he realized what was happening. Miss Carter," Leonard said slowly, blinking. "We didn't know." "And that's the problem, isn't it?" I said quietly. I looked at each of them. The way you treat people shouldn't depend on whether you know them or not. It doesn't matter if I'm a CEO or a student in a hoodie. If someone paid for a first-class ticket, they should be treated with the respect that first class deserves. At that moment, everyone in the front of the cabin realized something was wrong. The man in the expensive suit put down his newspaper and was now openly watching what was happening. The young man across from me looked stunned, torn between embarrassment and a strange sense of justification. I didn't raise my voice. There was no need to, because sometimes the truth hits hardest when it's said directly so that everyone can hear it. Brandon spoke first. "Miss Carter, I can explain." I raised my hand. "Not here. Not now." I glanced at my watch. "We'll be landing in 20 minutes. I want to talk to all 3 of you as soon as the passengers have disembarked." Leonard, the flight attendant, nodded without hesitation. Of course, Miss Carter. In the meantime, I said, trying to keep my voice steady and firm, make sure all the remaining passengers are given the service they deserve. Every one of them. They scattered as if a gust of wind had swept through the galley. Brandon began cleaning up the trash with renewed vigor. Kyle, who had previously ignored Marcus Grant, suddenly appeared at his seat and, with a smile that seemed a little forced, offered him a fresh drink. I sighed and turned to the window, where the lights of the city were beginning to appear in the distance. This wasn't what I had planned. I didn't fly here for confrontation. I just wanted to know the truth, to see everything through the eyes of our clients. But the blatant prejudice I saw. I couldn't keep quiet. My phone rang. A message from Jared. "How's the mission going?" I replied. "The curtain has been lifted. I'll explain everything soon." The rest of the flight passed in quiet tension, at least in our corner of the cabin. The crew went into full alert mode, being overly attentive to everyone, as if politeness could erase what I had already seen. As we began our descent into Boston, Marcus leaned slightly across the aisle. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "Yes." I turned to him, smiling sincerely this time. "I just wanted to thank you," he said. "I fly a lot for work, and this happens more often than people think." "You mean the difference in how you're treated based on the color of your skin and how you're dressed?" He nodded. "Yes. I'm a freelance architect. I dress for comfort, not beauty. But sometimes it seems like that's all that matters up here." "What's your name?" "Marcus Grant." I held out my hand. "Nice to meet you, Marcus. And I'm sorry about earlier." He shook my hand. "Don't apologize. It was worth it to see the look on their faces when you took out your badge." I couldn't help myself. I laughed. For the first time in the entire flight, we landed smoothly and headed for the exit. A moment later, Leonard's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logan International Airport. The local time is 5:23 p.m., and the temperature is 20 degrees. Please remain in your seats until the captain turns off the seatbelt sign." Then something unexpected happened. We would also like to extend a special welcome to Altitude Air CEO Monica Carter, who is joining us on today's flight. "Thank you for flying with us, Mrs. Carter." A wave of whispering swept through the cabin. Everyone turned around. Some passengers nodded or smiled at me. I quietly responded. When the seatbelt sign turned off, everyone stood up at once, crowding around the luggage and exits. Several passengers stopped to introduce themselves, shake my hand, or talk about the flight or the company. Most were friendly and supportive. One woman even offered to write a thank you note to the employee at the gate who had helped her board with her twins. I noticed that Marcus lingered at the exit. As he passed the crew, he simply nodded respectfully to them. "Good luck." I smiled at him. "And Marcus, if something like this happens on one of our flights, I want to hear about it directly." "Agreed," he said. "Have a good flight, Miss Carter." When the last passenger had left, I stayed behind and watched as Brandon, Kyle, and Leonard quietly gathered at the front. Their body language spoke volumes. Brandon was tense, gesturing with his hands. Kyle stared at his shoes. Leonard tried to look professional, but his fingers kept fidgeting with his lapel. I grabbed my bag and walked over to them. They froze. "Let's talk in the lounge," I said. I didn't raise my voice. Just a tone that made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. As we walked, I couldn't help thinking that just a few hours ago, these men hadn't even noticed me. Or worse, they had seen me and decided I wasn't worth their attention. And now they could barely look me in the eye. In the break room, I closed the door behind us. No one sat down. "You know why we're here," I began. "And I'm not going to repeat the obvious." They were silent. No excuses, no objections. Just a slight cough from Kyle and Leonard staring at the wall. Brandon tried to say something, but I raised my hand and he fell silent. "I'm not asking for an apology. This isn't about apologies. It's about awareness. It's about the culture you're creating. It's about how you make people invisible until they speak up." I let the pause hang. Let them feel it. From this moment on, things will be different. Not because you're suddenly going to change, but because now you're being watched. Because now I'm here. And I'm no longer invisible. I turned and walked out, leaving the door open. Let the wind of change blow in. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Click subscribe to join our community of storytellers and truth seekers. Every week, we share powerful stories of dignity and respect that will remind you to look beyond appearances. Where are you looking today? Tell us in the comments below. Share this video with someone you care about. Until next time.